experience began in second grade, when in preparation for the class play, our teacher excitedly told us we could each submit 3 bids for our most desired roles. I thought carefully amidst the giddy buzz of my classmates and used all 3 of my bids to nominate myself for the role I was certain suited me best, doing the lights. My teacher pulled me aside and said, "Lori, are you sure that's where you want to spend the entire play?" I pictured myself tucked safely and invisibly behind that thick, dark velvet curtain and nodded, "Oh yes, I'm certain." Stepping on stage today, though, it's not about my fear of being seen, of vulnerability, or even of being rejected. No, today, I fear in my bones that I could be murdered for what I'm about to share with you. I've examined it from every angle and determined my sharing would be worthwhile, no matter what, because I believe in the power of our stories to spread hope and change lives. My life began changing when I reached out to a coach about some behaviors concerning me in my marriage. Behaviors my marriage counselor had advised me to ignore. My coach responded unexpectedly. She removed her coaching hat, took me to breakfast, and revealed some of her darkness, that she had been in an abusive marriage without ever getting hit. What? I thought, beautiful, brilliant her? Abusive marriage, doesn't that involve hitting? And why is she telling me this? I mean, I have parents happily married for 40 years, and education and no substance or childhood abuse in my upbringing. But at my coach's insistence, I soon found myself walking into the local YWCA. The case manager handed me a form and asked me to circle any behaviors going on in my home. So I started circling. Well, he did threaten to kill the dog. That was scary. Erratic driving, mood swings, abandoning me in public places, throwing objects, threatening suicide, blame, shame, belittling. Fine. I circled everything that was true and handed the form over almost apologetically, hoping I could get that case manager back to serving those people who really needed it. She looked over my form and calmly explained, "This is called our lethality questionnaire, and according to what's going on in your home, there's nearly a 60% chance that you will be killed by your partner." Yeah. In that moment, I, the executive director, salsa and Zumba teacher, became a domestic violence victim and realized I'd been living as a fraction of a self. Over the next 18 months as a YWCA client, I set about on my healing journey. Every single week, I'd ask the case manager to kick me out if she ever thought services did not apply to me. She assured me she would. I started peeling back layers in my life, trying to unravel the throbbing pain and confusion about how I'd even gotten to this place. I uncovered something I never would have expected, but now know after speaking with hundreds of other survivors to be a common occurrence. The first incident of violence happened within 2 months of dating, but I had repressed and dismissed the memory. I want you to please imagine this is not just my voice, but the voices of so many others who have been silenced in shame and in fear. We were in college, driving along in his Jeep Wrangler when he got angry with me. I remember him yelling and screaming, and when he screeched into a parking spot at his apartment, he jumped out and slammed the car door shut. I just sat there silently in the passenger seat, not knowing what to say or do. The next thing I knew, from outside the vehicle, he placed both hands on the roll bar atop the Jeep. I heard grunts of rage, and he started shaking the entire vehicle back and forth, wheel to wheel. I was toppling inside like a rag doll. In that moment, a voice inside me that has never been louder said to me, "Lori, walk. You do not get treated this way. You are going to exit this vehicle, walk back to campus, and everything will be okay." What do you think I did? I questioned myself. Didn't want to hurt his feelings, didn't want to make a scene, was afraid I was just being oversensitive again. So instead, I followed him into his apartment, where the next thing I knew, he was laying on the floor sobbing about his childhood, because tragically, his father had died when my then boyfriend was just 7 years old. In that moment, all I wanted to do was help and fix things. Soon after that, I was in love. We later moved in together, and 12 years passed. Years also marked with fun, support of each other, and shared life experiences. But within those first 2 months, we'd probably set the tone for our entire relationship. That out of fear, I wouldn't speak up with my thoughts and feelings, that I would work to please, and that if I did not, threats, intimidation, violence, and certainly emotional manipulation would work on me. I share this for one reason: to spread critical education most of us do not receive. Right here in South Carolina, we've had amongst the highest rates of domestic violence homicides in the country. And across the US, at least 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience intimate partner violence. I cannot sit on the lessons I've learned while this many human beings are suppressed in who they are. People who often share a common trait of empathy and could otherwise be out healing our world. When I look back on my journey from victim to survivor to what I now call thriver, I realize my story is so much deeper. You see, the day I realized what had transpired was the day I finally woke up. It wasn't just those 12 years, but decades that I'd been diligently hiding behind the curtain, putting my own life in danger. While abuse is never caused or deserved by the person being abused, I took a hard look at what I had brought to the table to volunteer myself into the situation. The answer was a virtual lifetime of self-doubt, a total lack of confidence and self-trust, and zero belief in my own inner voice. I'd begun struggling with depression at age 14 and eating disorders at age 15. But instead of getting the long-term help I needed, I lived in denial. I wasn't going to be one of those broken people in counseling. I was a gifted kid, a cheerleader, a driven person. Things seemed to turn around when I started dating in high school. I felt that everything wrong in the world could be remedied so long as I could rest my head on the chest of my then running back boyfriend. I learned a scary and false lesson that permeated into my early 30s, that I could rely on other people to determine my worth and help me feel okay about my never good enough self, priming me to become a victim. During the time I was separated from my former spouse, I had a dream that we'd been driving in a car that had died at the bottom of a large hill. Determined to overcome this, we tied a rope to the vehicle and pulled with all of our might, trying to get that car up the hill. We couldn't do it. And suddenly it hit me. This vehicle simply couldn't take us any further. We each needed to be released from our dynamic in order to have the chance at going through our own healing processes. I want to impart to you 3 truths I learned during my healing because I believe they can apply no matter what may be lurking behind your velvet curtain. The first is that wounds and darkness can happen to anyone. People who hurt others are hurting within themselves, and while this doesn't excuse any behavior, anyone can become a perpetrator or a victim. Think back to childhood for just a second. What's the first thing you remember learning about darkness? Nightlight? Anyone? What if we imploded this never-ending paradigm of perpetrator and victim and instead looked at darkness as part of even the most well-intentioned life, and at each one of us as having the task of turning on our nightlight and navigating our own healing journey? The second truth I learned was that emotional healing can be a lot like the way a bodily wound heals. The first step medically is called inflammation, or what I call OMFG, this hurts like hell. In this stage, I reached for help, and it's necessary. We may need medicine, a salve, or even a doctor, or in my case, a whole brigade of them. So often people tell me they can't talk to friends about what they're going through, or they don't think services will apply to them, and I ask you, please, you are never alone. Find someone you can talk to and get the help you need. The second stage of wound healing is called proliferation. And what's fascinating here is the way the body literally dispels old cells so it can open and rebuild from a new place. This is where the true gift of darkness lies. It may feel like you're losing everything you've ever relied on to cope, but we cannot hang on to old patterns if we are to heal. It is from the ashes of destruction that we arise anew and find our truth. The third stage of wound healing is maturation, and this is where collagen forms and the area develops the tensile strength needed to become whole again. The most important lesson I learned here was what Buddhists call my tree, or becoming an unconditional friend to the self. My newly formed collagen was an inherent sense of self-worth, the willingness to set boundaries out of care, and perhaps most importantly, forgiveness for myself and for every person who has hurt me up until this point. Because as long as we're within the vice grip of what happened to us, we cannot become free. The last truth I want to impart is that we each have the power to make positive changes. We can carve new neural pathways, learn new ways of relating to ourselves and others, and set new relationship standards based on honesty, reciprocated with safety, and predicated on the commitment for each of us to own and grow through our darkness. Months into my journey, I went back to my coach, and she let me take her to breakfast this time. I thanked her profusely for helping me save my life and asked how I could ever repay her for her immense kindness and insight. She looked at me and said, "You're going to pay it forward. Someday, you'll meet someone who needs help, and you will know how to help them." I started leading volunteer projects to raise awareness to end violence and abuse and spread healthy relationship education. About 4 years in, I took my coach very seriously, listened to my inner voice, quit my 15-year career, and moved across the country to dedicate myself full-time to doing this work. This talk has been the most terrifying of my life because I do not want to harm anyone. I'm here to share love. Yet for 6 years, like so many other survivors, I've continued keeping a piece of myself in my shell in self-doubt, looking over my shoulder, fearful someone could come after me for sharing my truth. It is time for me to reclaim my full personal power and freedom in hopes that others can please do the same. While you may not necessarily need to share your story for TEDx perpetuity, I guarantee you'll find someone who needs to hear it, and that your paying it forward will lift the veil of darkness for that next person to shine and contribute their real selves to this world too. For my part, well, I'm here to do the light. I pledge to educate, to help heal, empower, and ignite as many lives as I can. I believe that together, we can step out from behind the curtain, face darkness head on, and embolden each other to become finally free. Thank you.